It was back in 2011 that I used to meet on Thursday mornings at a local Starbucks with a couple of men from the church I'd been attending. And we talk about what was going on in our lives and what we thought God was doing in the midst of it all. Of course, we'd enjoy the fellowship and the coffee, and that was what I was doing, waiting to get to enjoy my decaf mocha coffee when I saw the headline in one of the newspapers in a nearby rack. Violin sells at auction in Chicago for $9 million. My first thought was, come on, give me a break. I mean, just how good can a violin sound? Of course, I had to read more, and that was when I discovered that this particular violin was a Stradivarius made by the famous Italian stringed instrument maker. Of course, it was highly valued. Anything with his name on it would be. However, it occurred to me that, being human, not all of his creations would necessarily have been technically outstanding. But that really wouldn't have mattered if his name was on it. In fact, for all I knew, this particular violin may have been one of his lesser efforts. As the years passed, I continued to think about that article that God had arranged for me to see. If the auction had been a day earlier or a day later, or if we had met on Wednesdays or Fridays, I would never have seen the article that got me started thinking. During those years, I realized that there were actually three factors that contributed to that violin being so highly valued. The first, of course, was who made it. As mentioned, probably any instrument this incredibly great gifted craftsman had made and put his name on, regardless of its comparative excellence, would still have been valuable just because he had made it. The second was that each of his instruments was one of a kind. Sure, he may have made hundreds of stringed instruments in his lifetime, but keeping in mind that each one was handmade from natural materials, wood, and unlike instruments stamped out from synthetic materials in a factory, no two would be exactly alike. The combinations of wood, varnish, etc. used in each instrument, which would have an effect on the quality of sound each produced, added another layer of individuality to each of his creations. The final and crucial dimension in determining this particular violin's value resulted from the fact that it was sold at auction. After all, what is something really worth when it's sold at auction? Ultimately, it's worth what someone is willing to pay. Although the bidding didn't start at $9 million, it ended there because there was no one willing to offer a higher bid. The winner apparently felt it was worth the price, or he or she would likely not have bid that amount. So now you may rightfully wonder, what does this have to do with you? Well, the fact is that in a way, you are a $9 million violin. Although in reality your value exceeds that amount. In fact, your worth is so incredibly great that it is incalculable. There's no way to put a dollar value on your worth. To prove my point, let's look at you in light of the three criteria previously identified. Firstly, who made you? Now keep in mind that your parents only contributed to the creation of your body. The essence of who you are is a spiritual being living in that physical body who was conceived of and created by the King of the universe and the creator of the heavens and earth, which he then planted in your mother's womb at the moment of your physical conception. Secondly, you are unique. You were created intentionally and for a purpose. It's not like God had nothing better to do, so he made you. The reality is that God has a plan for this world, and he foresaw that he would need a you, so you were created as a needed part of his plan. There has never been another you in the entire universe, and there never will be. You are the perfect you. Perfect doesn't mean that you won't make some poor choices or have to experience the consequences of your choices. Just that you are true to God's design for who He intended and created you to be, because God does not create defective beings. If you grow into being the person God intended you to be, God knows you will make a difference in this world that only you could make. Finally, look at the price God was willing to pay in order to have a relationship with you unhindered by your poor choices. He gave up all the comforts of heaven to come to earth and live as one of His creations. And in that time, there was no indoor plumbing, not even toilet paper. Wow! Knowing how much we humans believe we have to pay a price for our poor choices, God relieved us of that impossible task by going to the cross in our place. But it wasn't as simple as that. First suffering a beating, scourging, and then being nailed to a cross in what remains one of the most painful and torturous methods of execution ever devised. He was willing to pay this price because that is how precious and valuable you are to the one who created you and loves you. Because of the price that God has paid, there is nothing that you have done or could do that would stand between your Creator and His great love for you and you. He will always see you as the person He created, intended you to be, not as the choices you have made or the things you have chosen to do, whether they be for better or for worse.